So my name is Antonia Zierer. I'm Executive Director of Invest in Bavaria, which is the business promotion and economic development agency of the German state of Bavaria. I'm based in San Francisco, and we're helping US companies expand into Germany, the largest market in the European Union. And I'm happy to be here and discuss with all the panelists the current issues regarding Europe and Brexit.
So my name is Jörg Kemkes. I have more or less the same role like Antonia. We want to help lure American companies. Sorry? No? Better? Okay. We want to help lure American companies going to Germany, but we want to make it easy for them to set up shop there. We are doing this more for than 30 years, and we want to help with the global expansion, and thank you for your attention.
Hi, my name is Klaus Brisch. Can you hear me?
No, the mic is not.
No? I can speak much louder if I need to.
Yeah, that's good.
Better? Okay, very good. So my name is Klaus Brisch. I'm head of technology worldwide for DWF, which is a UK-based law firm. I'm working out of Germany, and Brexit, of course, is a topic that I'm very much involved in, since I'm a German on the one hand, but working for a UK law firm.
My name is Melissa Harkham. Can you hear me? No. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Better.
My name is Melissa Harkham. I am originally from the UK. I'm now based in San Francisco, and we help companies from the US expand to the UK and Europe. And Brexit is now becoming one of those conversations about where companies should end up. So happy to be here and answer any questions.
Great. Discussion first. Brexit. In April of 2019, UK is scheduled to depart officially from the EU. And obviously this is going to have a significant impact on the European Union itself, but also to all the international trading partners that focuses a lot on our European partners. So for those of you who are here from Los Angeles, many of you already know that the EU is a huge trading partner of ours. In fact, not only do we trade with them in terms of imports-export, but they're some of our top foreign investors. So last year and also this year, the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation and the World Trade Center Los Angeles did a report tracking the number of foreign firms that have invested in Southern California. And the UK is our #2 investor, and Germany is our #5 investor. So combined together, that's a lot of jobs that they're creating, a lot of dollars they're bringing in. With the potential, with the upcoming Brexit, this is going to change the dynamic completely. So would love to hear from each one of you your perspective. One, in terms of the companies you serve in either the UK or in Germany, what's the mood currently? Are they worried about not only their interaction with each other, but also on a very selfish note with companies in the United States? What are their thought processes?
Well, I think from my perspective, the UK has historically been almost the first port of call, certainly from the companies that we work with, and then they use that as a launch pad into the rest of Europe. With Brexit now pending, and there being restrictions obviously on immigration, on the single market access and some of the trading platforms, I think what that does from a US company perspective is it changes the conversation. It doesn't mean that there's one versus the other, it just changes that conversation as to, well, where do we go first? Where's our biggest market? Where are our customers? So from my perspective, the conversation is changing, and certainly companies are very much more aware of where they want to go first and having that conversation first, but ultimately they know they're going to end up in Europe somewhere, so from my perspective it's sort of similar but different.
Well, from my view, there was a brief discussion going on in Germany, and I think on the rest of Europe as well, to figure out, who won? Did we won? Did they won? Who won? And basically, I think the assumption is that everybody lost. I think the feeling for Germans is everybody lost and nobody won. And that's kind of an awkward situation to be in, a lost situation.
I can only totally agree to this, because when our clients go to Europe, they go to the UK either or Germany first. Whatever, they will have to enter either market at some point. So, and what we only can offer and tell everyone, no matter how stupid politicians are going to decide this, I always think businessmen are normally way more intelligent. because they have to deal with day-to-day life, and we will find a way to make the day-to-day life agreeable again. I was already strongly advocating that people also should be educated before you allow them to vote for anything, because otherwise this seriously has unforeseen consequences, and let's say we are all left with a mess to deal with it and to keep business going, hopefully, as if nothing has happened, but something has happened.
Yeah. Antonia?
Yeah, I can only agree with all of you. So like Klaus said, I think everybody loses with that decision, and actually Germany is losing a very, very important negotiation partner, or partner and ally within the European Union, because the UK and Germany had similar views on a lot of topics and worked very closely together. So the UK will be dearly missed by Germany. But on the other hand, as Melissa is saying, in the past, companies went to UK first because it's an English-speaking market, it's a very large market, so it's a good start. It was a good starting point for the European Union. And we assume, and we already get the feedback from a couple of companies, that they want to move to Germany or go to Germany, expand to Germany now earlier than they probably would have considered in the past. So Germany will probably attract a lot more FDI in the near future, but we're going to see how this is going to develop.
So I think the panel brought up some really interesting points. One is that regardless of Brexit and some of these trade agreements, discussions, and the structure, business is going to happen anyways. It's happened for centuries and millennia, it's going to happen. The question is, what do we do now at this point? So from this conversation, it sounds like a lot of companies might be leaving the UK, especially American companies, maybe even Los Angeles companies might be leaving the UK for other opportunities to have easier access to Germany. So from a UK perspective and also from a Germany perspective, what would in order to retain those that are trying to leave the UK, what would be the practical steps that a business need to start considering? And from the German side, those that are trying to poach the UK companies or the international companies from UK to go to Germany, what are the steps that they need to start thinking about right now in preparation for 2019?
Well, certainly from a UK perspective, there's been a lot of conversation around what impact this is going to have on established industries. So if you look at something like manufacturing, there's going to be some changes to customs and tax treaties. The single market obviously allows for the free trade of goods as well as people. So those barriers are going to sort of come back up again. From a sector standpoint, the UK has an extremely strong financial services sector, and we've seen already, I think UBS announced that they were moving their headquarters, and there's been a couple of other banks sort of threatening to move their headquarters to different parts of the EU. I think where you have a company where it is a heavily regulated sector, like financial services or manufacturing, the single market is very important to that. Where you have a business like a law firm, like an accounting firm, a services firm, the single market is not really going to impact too much. The things that will impact those businesses will be talent, so the immigration laws that we have put in place, and also the general economic climate. The UK has already been downgraded by some of those agencies, and today we saw a much lower economic forecast for the UK than we had been anticipating. So the signs are there already that the economy in the UK is not going to bounce from this immediately. I think there's going to have to be some strong government leadership to make that happen and make sure that businesses are not affected.
Well, if you look at the situation as is, we do not even know where and to what extent the negotiations are going on, in what direction. So there are hard discussions going on, negotiations going on between the European Commission on the one hand side and the British government on the other side. So are we going to see a hard Brexit, a soft Brexit, whatever Brexit? So we don't know that yet. From a legal point of view, let's say the more complicated this situation is, the better for attorneys. So I'm just wait and see from a business perspective. That's certainly one thing. The other thing is that what really needs to be understood also from an American angle is that basically 80% of all laws within the European Union have been harmonized. So the standard of harmonization within the European Union was greater than in the United States. That's something to bear in mind. Then, if we see now the UK getting out of the European Union, we have historic comparisons, on how things develop legally. So now, when we are still harmonized, for instance, e-commerce, now we're talking about GDPR, which means the data protection privacy regulation of the European Union. Next May, it's going to enter into force, since we know that until then, the UK is still going to be part of the European Union. They're going to implement it. Of course, my colleagues in the UK are running great campaigns to make British-based companies compliant with this kind of EU regulation. So in a way, it's still business as usual, but what we'll see in midterm, probably in the long run, is greater differentiation between the EU and the UK regulation, whatever that will look like. So most likely, I think in the future, we're going to drift apart.
Let's say maybe you can drift apart officially, but I think our goal should be, even on the lower level, when it's the business level, to keep it together as best as we can.
Yeah.
I saw on the news there was an example from a company that was transporting forklifts from Germany to Belfast. And both sides were really devastated by the Brexit, and they were saying they did it only pre-European Union, and they said it was way harder to do business. They were happy that all the regulations were less, when it comes to all the VAT issues, and also about customs and duties you have to pay about all these things. It was way more complicated, and they got their paper stamped in every border and got questions about this, and now it was very easy. But what I'm saying is, they did this before the European Union, they've done it during the European Union, and they will continue doing it. It's only going to be harder. And they interviewed both sides, the entrepreneur in Belfast and also the one in Germany, and they were both, although businessmen, terribly sad, because there were also relationships have been evolved. And I can only see also, let's say, there's also been a World War I and World War II. There have always been friendships between those countries, which then have been compromised during those wars. And I think we should all work to keep those friendships alive, and even despite what's happening, to show them whatever you have decided, or whatever the voters have decided, the people who have to live with this, we should try to combine this. There might be more paperwork involved. Tax treaties might have to be renegotiated. We all don't know this right now. But when the UK is going ahead and want to lower their tax rate for companies to 15 or 17%, in Germany we have a regulation. Every company that is residing in a state where the tax burden overall is below 25% is being deemed as a tax haven. So this then means additional taxes on your profit in Germany, something which is unheard of from a European developed country which does not have, let's say, the reputation like Singapore or the Cayman Islands or something like this. So again, it is very difficult everywhere.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to say that I don't believe that business will, or international businesses will move like 100% of their operations from UK to the European mainland or European Union. But I do believe that the companies will look much closer where their customers are and where it makes sense to have people on the ground. So UK will still be a very important market, with over 65 million people living there. So it's still a market to consider. But on the other hand, we also see that, as you mentioned, especially some of the banks already we're looking for real estate in Frankfurt, and the Frankfurt real estate prices already went up quite a bit because they're looking for, I don't know, office space for 1,000 employees in Frankfurt. So we see movement here. The actual moves haven't happened yet, but they will so over the next couple of years, and we will see how many people actually will move from UK to Frankfurt, or whether the people will just look for other jobs in London, and they will hire Germans for the positions. That's something that the companies decide for themselves and with their strategy, but we already see some kind of movement here. And from a German perspective, I know it looks like you could believe that we're happy to poach some business, but actually that's not our intention. We would have liked to be a strong European Union together, and I mean the European Union will stay strong even without the UK. For UK, I think there will be some challenges in the next couple of years to figure out where UK is going.
Yeah, we have to re-find our place in the world at the moment.
Got it.
We're not going to know where that is.
Well, that's very kind for Bavaria not to poach, but here in Los Angeles, I have no problem poaching from Texas. So, looking at the other regions around the United States, Los Angeles is very unique in that sense. We don't have a lot of Fortune 500 companies the way that some New York or San Francisco they do. What we do have in LA County alone, there are over 700,000 small, medium-sized businesses. And so, from this discussion, it sounds like there are going to be a lot of opportunities for the legal and the accounting profession, and maybe even the real estate, for folks in both UK and Germany. Now, for the companies that are coming from Los Angeles, for example, in July, LA, we led a small delegation to Berlin to explore some opportunities and partnerships there. And a lot of the companies that express interest are tech companies. And I think what we found really quickly was that a lot of these tech companies need IP protection, and that was one of the reasons why the EU market was so attractive compared to some of our Asian partners, for example, because the same protection is not there. Given that Brexit will now possibly create multiple layers, what should the company do with technology that they really want to protect? What would you be advised to them to be? What should they start considering?
I mean, Klaus obviously very well placed to talk about IP protections. I mean, the UK legal system has been a sort of a flagship legal system globally for a very long time. We have a very well established system of law and courts and respected judiciary, as does Germany. I think as you look to, I mean, IP protection is only as good as the enforcement. So I think you have to make sure that you have a great law firm to put the protections in place, but you also have your IP sitting in a home that is secure, and you are able to enforce those agreements. So yes, Europe as a whole, we have the GDPR rules. The UK is adopting those. They will change over time, and whilst up until now the UK has had a seat at the table to help with those negotiations and amendments, we've lost that. And now we will be probably implementing changes that are agreed without the UK's input. But the chances of us having an unharmonised IP policies, IP protections, laws, regulations, is very slim. I think we will always look to harmonise with our European partners, because even though we're leaving the European Union, we're still in Europe as a continent, and as Antonia said, we have a very strong trading relationship with Germany and other European countries. So we want to make sure that whatever happens, we are consistent with our partners. So that's really key for us to present a sort of European face to the rest of the world.
Well, there's some very practical challenges. If you mentioned rightfully that IP is only as good as long as you can enforce it, but the European Patent Office and also the European Patent Court are both in Munich. So if that protection is lost because of the Brexit, then this protection is no longer available in the UK. So probably for registration, for instance, this means that you have to register patents both in Europe, most likely, and in the UK, whereas today it's still one. Yeah? If a patent is in the Munich European Patent Office, then you have the protection in the UK. So that's one thing. Second thing is, well, there's a huge discussion going on. Well, what is actually happening to the patents that are patented at the moment with the European Patent Office? Are they still valid in the UK, yes or not? That's something to think about.
Let's say, aside from our business clients, we also have a lot of UK investors as clients in Germany. And let's say it was also easy for them, you know, when you invest within the EU, there are very strict rules that you have freedom of movement of capital and assets, so it was all very well protected. In case there should be a hard Brexit and there should be no regulation on this, then the connection between Germany and the UK would be like a third-party country, which imposes heavier regulations on how to invest your money, how to deal with your investments, and also for people that are already invested in Germany. I don't know, is any benefit being grandfathered in? So, for example, you could, without any capital gains tax withheld, repatriate your profits from the UK to Germany and vice versa. So when they're going to be a third-party country, so what's going to happen with this? Will it keep on going? Do we have to renegotiate this? There's a double taxation treaty, of course, between the UK and Germany and also other countries, but they're all, let's say, regulations above within the European Union. Nobody knows what kind of effect this is going to have. And again, only when someone wants to make an investment, and only when everybody thinks we will figure it out, that moment an investor might really think, oh, I'd rather refrain from doing it. And that is already when the first damage is done.
And I actually already had some discussions with companies that, like, when I spoke with them in July, they told me, hey, yeah, we're going to move to London soon. And then they still haven't moved because they're just postponing their decision and would like to see more clearly about the impacts. And actually, I mean, we're all no experts. No one can see the future. The negotiations are still going on. So it's just not, no one can tell what the outcome will be. My guess would be that for the first couple of years, the UK will probably stick with the European law, that they would, I mean, there are discussions that the UK would like to make a law to implement all the European laws that exist into UK law, and then maybe over the next couple of years there will be some changes. But that's only one aspect. The other aspect is, as you said, immigration and other topics that the UK felt very strongly about, and the European Union also feels very strongly about. Yeah. So it's really very, very open. No one can tell what will happen with those topics.
But maybe when I chime into this, there might be some solution that, let's say, also some younger people might also start a movement because they don't want to leave the European Union. They want to stay in there. I don't know what kind of voice they might get, so maybe they get a soft deal or something like this. And even at my age, I was only used to that everybody was growing together. And I always say, I'm not German, I am proud European. And I personally felt like being kicked out of UK. When they voted for this, although it should be good for our business, I was deeply disappointed when this happened.
I think it's a disappointment all round, actually, from the UK perspective. I mean, you look at something like our National Health Service, if any of you are in the healthcare sector, it's the largest employer in Europe, and about 70% of those workers are from outside of the UK and are EU nationals. So for us to suddenly say that those people are no longer welcome is just insane, frankly. But I think also looking at the younger people and perhaps having a voice and coming out of Brexit, one of the things that's been sort of debated in Parliament is that when the legislation is put forward to accept or amend the deal that Theresa May is currently negotiating, or her team, that the Labour Party, now that they have a more significant presence in our government, could vote to veto that deal. And the question then is, what on earth happens? So we've agreed Brexit, we've triggered Article 50, there's a deadline, it's a line in the sand. What's going to happen if we suddenly say, no, we don't agree to that deal? And that's the debate at the moment. It's a very political debate. It's not really got business in mind, which is quite disappointing. But it is very much on the basis that Theresa May called a general election in June and pretty much lost. She lost her majority. So her power, her control to kind of force anything through in time for the Article 50 deadline is very much diminished now. So it's just a very unfortunate set of circumstances.
I think also it's important to recognize that the Brexit vote happened on the peak of the migration and refugee discussion that we had in Europe. So it was the worst time you could have that vote. So, and now the question really is, well, on how to rule back, because this discussion basically all over Europe, yeah, independently of polls, right, but all over Europe, this calmed down quite a bit, this refugee issue. And I think what is really important to understand, again, from a European perspective, if we just know that we need about 2 million IT specialists in Europe until 2020. So for the next 2 years, we need 2 million IT specialists all over Europe for the challenges and the transition into the digital world. We have no clue where we get them from. Our educational system, no matter what country, is too slow to catch up with that demand.
So we've been focusing a lot on the technical aspect of businesses, but now that we brought up politics, I'm going to enter that space a little bit. Here, I have to be the first to admit, I haven't been tracking the political sentiment and movement as much. I've been distracted by tweets in the middle of the night, so I would love to hear basically from the ground, from the UK and from Germany and all in Europe. Two-part question. One, we're seeing what's happening in Spain. The movement previously in terms of Scotland saying, you know what, we want to be a part of the EU, we're going to vote to separate from the UK. Where are we at with that? And also with Spain talking about, you know, certain region, Catalonia, moving forward. Are there other, I guess, nations that are facing similar situation that's going to put a risk at more countries that are going to be departing the EU? The reason why I ask this is this, for us here in the United States, it's been this discussion of nationalism has been brought up quite a lot, and now we're seeing in other countries as well. We just don't know how prevalent that is. So we'd love to get some insights.
Yeah, so we've had votes coming out of our ears in the UK for the last 5 years, and one of them was the Scottish referendum. So good old David Cameron asked the Scottish people whether they wanted to leave the UK. This is before Brexit, and Scotland voted for caution. They said no, we want to stay part of the UK. And one of the big arguments for doing that is if you left the UK, you would have to reapply to become part of the EU, and if you stay in the UK, you're a member of the EU. And then a year later, we all decided that we would all leave the EU. So the initial response from Scotland was, you know, this is, you told us an untruth, you know, we voted on the basis that you would be doing one thing and you've decided to do something else. So they tried to sort of reinvigorate the discussion about the referendum post-Brexit. That hasn't really gone down very well. During the last general election, the Scottish nationalists lost quite a lot of ground, and I think it was kind of vote-weary public to a certain extent who was sort of didn't want to have another referendum about leaving the UK. So there was a bit of a sign that Scotland is a bit more settled now. The issue that the Brexit vote has raised, of course, is the Northern Ireland and Irish border question. Ireland, as an island, is separated by a border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. And for 30 years, there was a war, effectively, in the UK and Ireland over who would have control over Northern Ireland. And that war ended with the help of the US, actually, post 9/11 with the Good Friday Agreement, which agreed that there would be no borders. There are no border crossings between Ireland and Northern Ireland. You can cross over as many times as you want, and people do on a daily basis. Of course, what Brexit has done is recreated that border. So while Scotland is a bit more settled, we now have this huge kind of political, very inflammatory issue. And part of the Good Friday Agreement was that there would be no borders, and how they're going to resolve that, I really do not know.
Yeah, maybe I chime in because I represent a state that's also quite independent within Germany, and a lot of people, there's actually a movement in Bavaria like to become independent from Germany, but it's more or less a joke. No one is taking this really seriously. So I don't think there will ever be a exit from Germany for Bavaria. But for other regions, this is actually a problem. I mean, you were we were discussing Catalonia in Spain, but the European Union has taken a very clear stance that anyone who leaves the European, or who leaves one of the member states, will not be part of the European Union. So that would mean that every region that decides to leave their national state would have to reapply for membership in the European Union, which can take decades. And that is actually a very, very severe economic threat to those regions. So my brother is actually just in the movement, like is moving from Munich to Barcelona right now. So I was asking him what he is going to do now, but he said, well, calm down, nothing will happen. But I don't know, I'm not so sure about that. And I think the next couple of weeks will be very crucial in the development with Spain and Catalonia. But I mean, that's not the topic of this panel, but you can see those movements all over Europe right now.
And I think you're totally right, even when Catalonia is not subject of the panel, but when you look at the bigger picture, when you go way back historically into Europe, Europe was dominated by a bunch of fighting tribes against each other for centuries, constantly at war, bashing their heads for some sliver of land, always. So, we had so many wars in Europe, and finally they came to their senses after World War II, also thanks to Churchill, some from the UK, and also to our Chancellor Kohl, to finally, let's say, make peace and make sure that it is peace. And this is the longest period of peace we've ever had in Europe. And I am terribly afraid that the younger generation does not remember this anymore, what it is to live in a state where it's war, where you cannot enjoy all your freedom and your piece of life. For them, that seems to be like, oh, that's interesting. Why not, let's say, being against each other a little bit? Why not, let's say, making fun of this ethnicity or something like this? We have been there. And I really thought we would have overcome this, all of Europe. So I think Brexit was the start. Then we have now Catalonia, then 2 counties in Italy are voting for more independence right now. So it pops up all over, and I'm the last one who wants to have a strong hand somewhere, but you have to take a stand. We are a united Europe, and we should please stay that way, because fighting each other, it's like in a family, this never leads to anything. We should concentrate on business and to improve ourselves in the world.
That's interesting thoughts and maybe a good advice for us, because we've been hearing some movement here about Calzit, with California leaving the United States and starting our own country here. Given that we are the 6th largest economy in the world, I think a lot of people feel that we can do it. But speaking back to economy and back to the business side, besides the UK and besides Germany, I'm sure each one of you will recommend companies going to your region. What about the rest of Europe? What other opportunity sites are there as they're looking at these changes that will be coming that will really transform how we do business in Europe? What other ideal locations are there outside of your areas, of course?
There's no other countries in Europe.
Well, we've been hearing a lot about Ireland, talking about it, and of course Belgium saying it, come. And in Los Angeles here, this is actually a great asset for us. I think some of the audience members have heard from other countries earlier as well. And for those of you who don't know, Los Angeles is the home to the world's 3rd largest consular corps. We have 102 nations represented, 66 full-time consul generals, and about the rest of them are honorary, but they're very active. So you can actually reach the rest of the world quite easily here, and we've been hearing quite a lot from them saying, come. So wanted to get your opinion and your thoughts. Besides your region, who are the most competitive and compelling region that we should start also looking at?
Well, Klaus.
Frankly, I think this cannot be answered in a very easy way, because when you see, besides the original member states of the European Union, they all have a democratic, more or less capitalist, market-oriented system. So, and then we integrated, we had to, some leftovers of the Soviet Union. So when they kicked them out because they couldn't afford them anymore, then they burdened them simply onto the European Union. And now we really have to face socialist/communist countries who have to be educated in doing business, and people who have to learn to think for themselves because they were living under a government that told them exactly what to do and not to do. And maybe we're now in a generation which starts to catch up, but there's still an older generation. They have never learned. I'm not blaming them for anything, because they were born into this system, they have to live with this system.
Yeah.
But those countries are so far behind our evolved system that they simply have to learn. And this is something we should have to focus on, all these countries, to educate them and bring them up to speed. And now, I think the clock is somewhat turned back. What I'm saying is, there are a lot of opportunities, there's also a lot of talent there, but right now, let's say we are diverted because dealing with those Brexit and other independent movements.
Yeah, but getting back to your question, looking at other regions in Europe, for instance, if you're in the software business or cybersecurity business, countries like Romania, Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, are leading edge in Europe for that kind of technology. So there's no doubt about it. Now the question, well, why is that the case? Well, because they all come there from their secret services. So there's a certain tradition to that. So then the question, of course, arises, well, how near are they still to their own resources from scratch on? So, but if you think about design, if you think about also apps, Italy is certainly a place to go. It really depends on your business. So go where your customer is. So that's the first advice. So that's depending, then you look at yourself and then, well, where do I sell my first product? And where's my first customer? That's where you open up your business. That's where you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's what we see as well. And a lot of times companies kind of get it wrong because they'll pick a jurisdiction where, you know, somebody's been on vacation or they've got a holiday home or, you know, the CEO has always wanted to live there. Exactly. So it's really important to kind of examine the rationale for going into Europe and look at, the customers will drive it, or as you say.
Yeah. I would only add that you really have to be clear about what you would like to achieve in the European Union. If you're looking for customers, you should go where your customers are. If you're looking for R&D, look where the talent is and look where the talent is readily available and also at a good price available. And so Europe is a very diverse continent, and you will find for every industry, and every state and each stage that you're in and goal that you have, I would probably give you a different answer. And but like Melissa said, really do the analysis, talk to experts, get someone who can guide you through the landscape in Europe, because it's very diverse, and it's not that everything that holds true for Germany holds true for other states, even though like the law is very, very much harmonized, but culture is different, talent is different, prices are different, customer bases are different. So really look at European Union as one big market, but with sub-markets in between.
Got it. So we're running out of time, so two-part last question for each of the panelists. I promised the audience member that we're going to end this on time so we can go get drinks.
I know, yeah.
So with that said, first question is short, maybe one-sentence advice for businesses. What should they be looking out for? What should they do to prep for these changes? Second question is, when they go to your region, what would be one food that you would recommend that they taste from your region that you highly recommend?
Okay. So one piece of advice, I think if you are looking at heading to the UK, check your sector, make sure that the regulations and speak to your tax advisor about the changes that are coming. And as Antonia said, just make sure you're clear about what talent you're looking for, whether it's salespeople or engineers or whatever it might be. In terms of food, I have to say the UK hasn't been known for our culinary expertise, but I would highly recommend Indian food. I don't think you can get better Indian food anywhere other than London. So.
Okay, thank you. Russ?
Well, with respect to food, I would advise you to try the great variety of German bread.
Ah, that's true, yeah.
That's certainly something. I think we have more than 3,000 variations to that. So it takes you a while, probably a day or two. Yeah. With respect to your business endeavors, don't be scared, just keep watching.
Yeah.
Yes, I think I can only sum this together. Yes, talk to the specialists, the local specialists who really deal with this every day. Even when we don't know the solutions, we will find a solution when it comes to this. And answering questions about food, I'm the total wrong person to ask this. Although I'm German, I don't eat any kind of sausages, I never have. I cannot even stand the smell of it, and I don't drink beer at all, and never have. I can also not stand the smell of beer. So when it comes to this, I'm not the right person to talk about this.
You'd say sushi then.
Yeah, but this is not typically German. So.
Well, Indian is also
I know.
is
Yeah,
kind
but,
of UK, so you're in the family, I guess.
Yeah, regarding the advice, I'd say don't rely on your friends that just heard about or read about something. Really talk to experts, do your analysis, and decide on the facts and figures. And regarding food, I'm from Bavaria. We love pretzels, and pretzels is actually my favorite type of bread. So yeah, try Bavarian pretzels.
And just a quick plug for Antonia and other consulate and colleagues in that environment. The governments have huge free resources. So speak to the consulates that are in Los Angeles and ask them how they can help you, because there's an awful lot of resource out there.